The fluorescent lights of the rest stop flickered against the midnight cold. Travis Holloway pulled his rig into the lot, expecting nothing but coffee and silence. Instead, he saw them. An elderly couple, sitting upright on a metal bench, backs straight as soldiers, hands folded like they were waiting for someone who would never come. In the freezing dark. 2 days, the old man would later whisper, his voice cracking. 2 days since their son dropped them here and drove away without looking back. Their clothes were wrinkled, but unmistakably expensive. Their words were measured, painfully polite. But their eyes told a different story, one of betrayal so deep it had no bottom. Travis had barely enough to feed his 9-year-old daughter. His wallet held $200 for the entire month, but when Zoe looked at him with those eyes, the ones that still believed the world was kind, he knew he couldn't walk away. That single choice would unravel everything he thought he knew about family, sacrifice, and what happens when kindness collides with a truth too dark to speak aloud. Because the people you save don't always stay saved, and sometimes an act of mercy reveals a scandal that changes everyone involved. Travis had been driving the same route for 3 years now, Interstate 40, stretching across states like a ribbon of asphalt through the heart of America. The big rig hummed beneath him, a 17-ton machine that had become more home than his apartment ever was. In the passenger seat, Zoe slept with her head against a rolled-up jacket, her breath fogging the window in small, rhythmic clouds. She was 9 years old, with her mother's dark hair and his own stubborn chin. Every other weekend, when school allowed, she rode with him. It saved money on childcare, and if he was honest, it saved him from the loneliness that crept in during the long stretches between exits. The dashboard clock read 11:47 when he pulled into the Meadowbrook rest stop. It was one of those places that existed outside of time, where fluorescent lights buzzed against the darkness and vending machines offered stale sandwiches to travelers who had run out of options. Travis killed the engine and sat for a moment, listening to the tick of cooling metal. Zoe stirred, but didn't wake. He would let her sleep while he grabbed coffee, maybe stretched his legs before the final push to their delivery point in Columbus. The cold hit him the moment he opened the door. November in the Midwest had teeth. He pulled his jacket tighter and walked toward the building, his boots crunching on gravel. That was when he saw them. At first, he thought they were statues, the way they sat so still, so perfectly upright on that metal bench near the entrance. But statues didn't breathe, and he could see the faint mist rising from their mouths in the frozen air. An elderly man and woman. The man wore a camel-colored overcoat that had probably cost more than Travis made in a month. The woman had a silk scarf wrapped around her silver hair, though it had come loose on one side. They sat with their hands folded in their laps, staring straight ahead at nothing. Not talking. Not moving. Just waiting. Travis slowed his pace, something tightening in his chest. He knew that look, He had seen it on his own father's face in the nursing home, right before the end. The look of people who had been forgotten. He almost kept walking. He had learned over the years of driving these roads that you couldn't save everyone. That sometimes the kindest thing was to mind your own business and let people handle their own problems. But his feet stopped anyway, planted on the cold concrete. The woman's eyes shifted to him. They were pale blue, watery with age, but sharp, intelligent, and utterly exhausted. "Evening," Travis said, his voice rougher than he intended. The man turned his head slowly, as if the movement required great effort. His face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp beneath thin skin. But his eyes, dark and clear, held something Travis couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe. Or shame. "Good evening," the man replied. His voice was cultured, each word carefully shaped, the kind of accent that came from expensive schools and country clubs. "Forgive us for occupying this bench. We'll move if we're in your way." Travis shook his head. "You're not in my way. I just wanted to make sure you folks were all right. It's pretty cold out here." The woman pulled her coat tighter, though it did nothing to hide the trembling in her hands. "We're managing," she said softly. But her voice cracked on the last word, and she looked away quickly, as if ashamed of the weakness. Travis shifted his weight, suddenly aware of how inadequate he was for this moment. He was a truck driver, not a social worker. He didn't know what to say to people who clearly didn't belong on a bench in the middle of nowhere. "How long have you been sitting here?" he asked. The silence that followed was heavy, weighted with things unspoken. Finally, the old man answered. 2 days. His voice barely rose above a whisper. 2 days since our son dropped us here and drove away without looking back. The words hit Travis like a physical blow. He stared at them, trying to process what he had just heard. 2 days, in this cold, without food, without shelter, left here like garbage on the side of the road. "Your son," Travis repeated slowly, "left you here, at a rest stop, in November." The woman's hands trembled harder now. She pressed them together, trying to still them. "He said we needed to learn a lesson," she said, her voice barely audible. "About the choices we make, about stubbornness and pride." Travis felt something hot and sharp rising in his throat. Anger. The kind that made his vision narrow and his fists clench. What kind of person did that? To their own parents? What kind of man drove away and left elderly people to freeze? The old man must have seen something in Travis's face, because he spoke again, quickly this time. "Please don't think poorly of him. We raised him to be strong, to value what matters. Perhaps we raised him too well." The words made no sense, but Travis didn't press. He looked back toward his truck, where Zoe still slept in the passenger seat. $200 in his wallet. That was all he had until the next paycheck, still 5 days away. 50 for gas to get home. 30 for groceries. 20 for Zoe's school lunch account. That left $100 to somehow stretch across a week. He couldn't afford to help these people. He could barely afford to help himself. But then he thought about his own parents. His father, who had died 3 years ago in a nursing home, Travis couldn't afford to visit more than once a month. His mother, who had followed 6 months later, her heart simply giving up without her husband beside her. He thought about the regrets that still kept him awake at night. The phone calls he hadn't made. The visits he had postponed. The time he could never get back. He looked at the elderly couple again, at their expensive clothes and careful dignity, and eyes that held more pain than any person should have to carry, and he made a decision that would change everything. "Come with me," Travis said. The old man blinked, confused. "I'm sorry." Travis gestured toward his truck. "I have a sleeper cab. It's not much, but it's warm. You can rest there tonight, while I figure out what to do." The couple exchanged glances, something passing between them that Travis couldn't read. Years of marriage, compressed into a single look. The woman spoke first. "We couldn't possibly impose. You don't know us. We could be anyone." Travis almost laughed. "Lady, anyone dangerous wouldn't be sitting on a bench for 2 days in the freezing cold. Come on, my daughter's asleep in the cab, but there's room in the back." He saw the moment they broke, the moment survival instinct overcame pride. The old man stood first, his movements slow and painful. The woman followed, leaning heavily on his arm. Together, they walked toward the truck like refugees approaching a border they weren't sure would let them through. Travis opened the sleeper compartment, revealing the narrow bed behind the front seats. It wasn't much. A mattress barely big enough for one person, a thin blanket, a pillow that had seen better days. But it was warm, and right now, that was everything. "I'll sleep up front," Travis said. "You two take the bed. There's a blanket in the compartment under the mattress." The old man's throat worked, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Young man, we don't even know your name." Travis extended his hand. "Travis Holloway." The old man took it. His grip was weak, but his handshake was firm, trained by decades of business meetings and deals. "Walter Ashford," he said, "and this is my wife, Dorothy." Travis nodded, filing the names away. Ashford. It tickled something in the back of his mind, but he couldn't place it. "Nice to meet you both. Now get some rest. We'll figure out the rest in the morning." Dorothy climbed into the sleeper first, her movements careful and deliberate. Walter followed, settling beside her with a soft groan. Travis pulled the curtain closed, giving them privacy. Then he climbed into the driver's seat, careful not to wake Zoe. She stirred slightly, mumbling something about pancakes, then fell back into sleep. Travis sat in the darkness, listening to the quiet sounds from the back, the rustle of fabric, a soft cough. And then, so quiet he almost missed it, the sound of someone crying. Not loud, sobbing tears, but the kind of crying that came from deep inside, where hope went to die. The kind that said everything about betrayal and loss and the cruelty of being abandoned by the people who were supposed to love you most. Travis stared out at the empty parking lot, at the flickering lights and the darkness beyond. He thought about his wallet, sitting in his jacket pocket with its $200. He thought about Zoe, sleeping peacefully beside him, trusting him to make the right choices. And he thought about the elderly couple in his sleeper cab, people whose son had left them like trash on the side of the road. In the morning, he would have to make decisions, figure out where to take them, how to help them, what to do about the route he was supposed to drive. But right now, in this moment, he had done the only thing he could do. He had refused to walk away. And somehow, he knew that single choice had just changed the course of his life in ways he couldn't begin to understand. The first light of dawn painted the rest stop in shades of gray and gold. Travis woke with a crick in his neck and the taste of stale coffee in his mouth. Beside him, Zoe was already awake, her face pressed against the window as she watched a family of deer picking their way across the frost-covered grass. "Dad," she whispered, her breath fogging the glass. "There are people in our bed." Travis rubbed his eyes, remembering. "I know, sweetheart. They needed help." Zoe turned to look at him, her brown eyes serious. She had her mother's eyes. It was the thing Travis missed most, seeing Rebecca looking back at him every time his daughter asked a question. "Are they homeless?" she asked. Travis hesitated. "I don't think so. But they didn't have anywhere to go last night." Zoe nodded, processing this with the peculiar logic of 9-year-olds. "So we're helping them. Like when we found that dog last summer." Travis almost smiled. The dog had been a stray, half-starved and limping. Zoe had insisted they take it to a shelter, even though it meant driving 40 miles out of their way. The dog had been adopted within a week, and Zoe had talked about it for months. "Something like that," Travis said. "But these are people, not dogs. It's more complicated." The curtain behind them rustled. Walter emerged first, his silver hair disheveled, his expensive coat wrinkled from sleep. He looked older in the morning light, the lines on his face deeper, the weight of exhaustion more visible. But his eyes were alert, taking in the cab, the girl, the driver. "Good morning," he said quietly. "Thank you for your hospitality. We'll be out of your way shortly." Travis twisted in his seat. "Where exactly are you planning to go?" Walter and Dorothy exchanged another one of those looks. This time, Travis saw the fear in it, the uncertainty. "We're not sure yet," Dorothy admitted, appearing behind her husband. She had smoothed her hair back and straightened her scarf, trying to restore some semblance of dignity. "We have a house in Riverside, but it's 300 miles from here, and we have no way to get there." 300 miles. Travis did the math quickly. That would add at least 6 hours to his route, maybe more. 6 hours he didn't have if he wanted to make his delivery window. 6 hours that could cost him his job if his dispatcher found out. He looked at Zoe, who was watching the elderly couple with undisguised curiosity. Then he looked back at Walter and Dorothy. At their carefully maintained composure that couldn't quite hide the desperation underneath. "I have a delivery in Columbus," Travis said slowly. "That's 200 miles from here. After that, I'm headed back toward Riverside anyway. You can ride with me until Columbus. We'll figure out the rest from there." Walter's jaw tightened. "We have no money to pay you." Travis waved a hand. "I'm not asking for money. Consider it a favor from one human being to another." Dorothy's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back quickly. "That's extraordinarily kind of you, Mr. Holloway. We won't forget this." Travis started the engine, the big diesel rumbling to life. "Call me Travis, and right now, let's focus on getting some food in everyone. There's a diner at the next exit. Breakfast is on me." He saw Walter start to protest. Saw the pride flare in his eyes, but hunger won out, as it always did. The old man nodded stiffly. "Thank you, Travis." The diner was one of those timeless American establishments that looked exactly the same whether you visited in 1970 or 2024. Red vinyl booths, checkered floors, a counter lined with chrome stools. The smell of coffee and bacon grease hung in the air like a benediction. They slid into a corner booth, Zoe bouncing excitedly on the seat. She loved diners, loved the ritual of ordering from menus and watching her food arrive on heavy ceramic plates. A waitress appeared, her name tag reading Brenda in faded letters. She poured coffee without asking, a skill honed by decades of early morning shifts. "What can I get you folks?" Travis ordered eggs and toast, the cheapest items on the menu. Zoe wanted pancakes, her eyes pleading until Travis nodded. Walter and Dorothy studied their menus for a long moment before ordering simple oatmeal and fruit. Travis noticed how they chose the cheapest options, how they folded their hands in their laps and sat perfectly straight, as if afraid to take up too much space. While they waited for food, Zoe broke the silence with the fearless curiosity of childhood. "I'm Zoe," she announced. "I'm 9 years old, and I'm in 4th grade. What are your names?" Dorothy smiled, and for the first time, Travis saw warmth in her expression. "I'm Dorothy, and this is Walter. It's lovely to meet you, Zoe." "Why were you sleeping at the rest stop?" Zoe asked. Travis opened his mouth to tell her it was rude to ask, but Walter spoke first. "We were waiting for someone," he said carefully. "But they were delayed. Your father was kind enough to help us." Zoe accepted this explanation with a nod. "Dad helps people a lot. He says it's important to be kind, even when it's hard." Travis felt his face flush. He wasn't used to his own words being quoted back at him. Dorothy reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. "Your father is teaching you well," she said to Zoe. Then to Travis, "You're raising a remarkable young woman." The food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence. Travis watched Walter cut his fruit into precise pieces, watched Dorothy fold her napkin in her lap with automatic grace. These were people who had been wealthy once, he realized. People who knew which fork to use at fancy dinners and how to make small talk at cocktail parties. What had happened to bring them to a rest stop in the middle of nowhere? What had their son done that was terrible enough to abandon his own parents? After breakfast, they climbed back into the truck and headed toward Columbus. Zoe, emboldened by the meal, peppered the elderly couple with questions. What was their favorite color? Did they have any pets? What was the best place they had ever visited? Walter and Dorothy answered patiently, their voices warming as they talked. Travis listened with half an ear while he drove, his mind working through logistics. Columbus was still 4 hours away. After that, he had to unload, do paperwork, then start the drive back. If he took them all the way to Riverside, he would miss his next pickup. His dispatcher would have questions. Questions Travis didn't have good answers for. Around noon, they stopped at a truck stop for fuel. While Travis filled the tank, Walter approached him, moving carefully across the concrete. "Travis," he said quietly, "we need to be honest with you about something." Travis replaced the fuel cap and turned to face him. "All right." Walter glanced back at the truck, where Dorothy and Zoe were visible through the window, talking and laughing. "My wife and I aren't just random people who fell on hard times," he said. "We used to own a business, a successful one, but we made choices that cost us everything. Our son believes we were foolish, that we chose pride over practicality. Perhaps he's right." Travis studied the old man's face. "What kind of choices?" Walter's shoulders sagged slightly. "We owned a chain of hotels, 23 properties across 6 states. 5 years ago, the business began to fail. My son, Philip, took over as CEO. He had a plan to save it, but it required selling something we had promised never to sell. A piece of land, a small house where Dorothy and I started our lives together, before the success and the money. It's not worth much on paper, but to us, it's everything. Every memory we have of building our life, our real life, before the empire." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "We refused to sell. The business collapsed anyway. Philip blamed us. He's been distant ever since, but 2 days ago, it came to a head. He said we needed to understand what our stubbornness had cost. He drove us to that rest stop and left us there." Travis felt the anger return, hot and sharp. "He left you there to teach you a lesson? That's not teaching. That's cruelty." Walter shook his head. "He's hurting, Travis. The business was his life. He built his identity around it. When it fell, so did he. I don't excuse what he did, but I understand the pain that drove it." Travis wanted to argue, wanted to say that pain didn't excuse abandonment. But he thought about his own failures, his own moments of rage and despair after Rebecca died. The times he had yelled at Zoe for nothing, the times he had driven too fast on empty roads, tempting fate. People did terrible things when they were broken. "So what now?" Travis asked. "Do you want to go back to that house? The one you wouldn't sell?" Walter nodded. "It's all we have left. We lost the mansion, the cars, the bank accounts. But we kept that house. It's in Riverside, on a quiet street with old trees. We thought we might retire there, live simply. I suppose now we have no choice." Travis pulled out his phone and checked the map. Riverside was 100 miles past Columbus, in the opposite direction from his return route. Taking them there would cost him an entire day, maybe more. He would miss his next pickup. His dispatcher would be furious. He might lose his job. He looked at Walter, at the hope and fear warring in the old man's eyes. Then he looked at the truck, where Zoe had her face pressed against the window, waving at them. And he thought about the question his daughter would ask if he said no. "Why can't we help them, Dad? Don't they need us?" "All right," Travis said. "After Columbus, we'll take you to Riverside." Walter's eyes widened. Travis, no. That's too much. We've already imposed on you enough. But Travis shook his head. You haven't imposed on anything. And I'm not leaving you stranded in Columbus with no way to get home. We'll figure it out. Walter's throat worked, and for a moment, Travis thought the old man might cry. Instead, he extended his hand. Travis shook it, feeling the tremor in Walter's grip, the gratitude that words couldn't express. They drove on. The miles unfolded beneath the wheels, and inside the cab, something shifted. Dorothy began telling Zoe stories about her childhood, about growing up on a farm in Iowa, where the corn grew taller than the house. Walter talked about building his first hotel, about the mistakes he had made, and the lessons he had learned. Zoe listened with rapt attention, asking questions that made the elderly couple laugh. Travis listened too, stealing glances in the rearview mirror. He saw the way Dorothy's face lit up when she talked about her past, the way Walter's hands moved when he described the architecture of his buildings. These weren't just random old people. They were human beings with rich, complex lives, with histories and dreams and regrets, just like everyone else, just like him. By the time they reached Columbus, Travis had made a decision. He pulled into the warehouse district and parked the truck. I need to unload, he told his passengers. It'll take about 2 hours. There's a park across the street with benches. You folks can stretch your legs if you want. Walter and Dorothy climbed down carefully, holding hands like teenagers. Zoe skipped beside them, pointing out birds and squirrels. Travis watched them go, then pulled out his phone. He dialed his dispatcher. Holloway, came the gruff voice. Where are you? Travis took a deep breath. Columbus. Look, I need to talk to you about my route back. There was a pause. What about it? Travis explained, carefully editing out certain details. He had picked up some people who needed help. He needed to make a detour. It would delay his next pickup by a day, maybe 2. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Travis thought the call had dropped. Then, are you insane? We have schedules, Holloway. Commitments. You can't just decide to play Good Samaritan on company time. Travis's jaw tightened. I understand, but this is important. Another pause. Important enough to risk your job? The question hung in the air between them. Travis thought about his apartment, about the bills piling up on the kitchen counter, about Zoe's school fees and the groceries they needed, and the 1,000 small expenses that came with raising a child alone. He thought about what would happen if he lost this job, how long he could make the rent last, whether he could find another position before the savings ran out. Then he thought about Walter and Dorothy, sitting on that bench in the freezing dark, abandoned by their own son, waiting for someone who would never come. He thought about the choice he would be teaching Zoe if he walked away now. Yeah, Travis said quietly. It's important enough. The dispatcher sighed, long and heavy. You're a good driver, Holloway, one of the best, but this is going to cost you. I can maybe shift your next pickup back a day, but after that, you're on your own. And if you're not back on schedule by Monday, we're going to have a serious conversation about your future here. Travis closed his eyes. Understood. Thank you. He ended the call and sat for a moment, staring at the phone in his hand. He had just gambled his livelihood on 2 people he had known for less than 24 hours. People who couldn't pay him back, who had nothing to offer but gratitude. Rebecca would have understood, he thought. She had always been the one pushing him to be better, to choose compassion over convenience. You have a good heart, she used to tell him. Don't let the world make it hard. The world had tried. God knew it had tried. But sitting in that truck, with the sun setting behind the warehouses and his daughter laughing in the park across the street, Travis felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Not the empty satisfaction of a completed route or a signed delivery form, but real purpose, the kind that came from choosing right over easy. He climbed down from the cab and walked toward the warehouse to begin unloading. The work was hard, physical, the kind that made his back ache and his hands blister. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't mind. Because when he was done, he would drive 3 people toward home. And maybe, just maybe, he would find a way to make it work. The next 3 days blurred together in a rhythm that felt almost like family. They drove from Columbus to Riverside, taking the back roads, because Travis wanted to avoid the highway tolls. Walter sat in the passenger seat now, navigating with an old paper map he had found in the glove compartment. Dorothy and Zoe occupied the sleeper, playing card games and singing songs that Dorothy remembered from her childhood. At night, they stopped at cheap motels, where Travis paid for a single room and gave it to the elderly couple while he and Zoe slept in the truck. During the day, they shared meals at diners and rest stops, pooling their resources to make Travis's dwindling cash last longer. Walter began to open up. He told Travis about the hotels he had built, about the pride he had felt watching them rise from empty lots. He talked about Philip, about the bright, ambitious boy who had grown into a driven, ruthless man. "I taught him to value success," Walter said one evening as they drove through Indiana. "I thought I was preparing him for life, but I forgot to teach him about compassion, about the things that matter more than money." Dorothy added her own stories. She had been a teacher before marrying Walter, back when women were expected to give up careers for family. She had loved it, loved the children, loved watching young minds grow and expand. "I gave it up when we started the hotels," she said quietly. "Walter needed me, and I wanted to support him. But I missed it. Still do sometimes." Zoe absorbed these stories like a sponge. She asked questions about everything, her curiosity boundless. What was it like to build a hotel? Did Dorothy miss teaching? What was their favorite memory together? And gradually, Travis saw something happening. Saw the way Dorothy's hand would rest on Zoe's shoulder when they walked. Saw the way Walter smiled when Zoe laughed. They were becoming surrogate grandparents, filling a void in Zoe's life that Travis hadn't fully realized existed. On the 4th day, they reached Riverside. It was a small town, the kind that still had a main street with locally owned shops and churches on every corner. Walter directed them through tree-lined streets until they reached a modest house at the end of a cul-de-sac. It was small, maybe 1,200 square feet, with white siding and blue shutters. The lawn needed mowing, and the garden was overgrown, but it had good bones. Travis could see that. Walter and Dorothy sat in the truck for a long moment, staring at the house. "Home," Dorothy whispered. "We're home." They climbed down slowly, Travis and Zoe following. Walter pulled a key from his pocket and opened the front door. Inside, the house was dusty but intact. Furniture covered in sheets, boxes stacked in corners, the remnants of a life put on hold. Dorothy moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching surfaces, remembering. Walter stood in the living room, his shoulders shaking. Travis realized the old man was crying. Not the quiet tears from the rest stop, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place of profound relief. "I thought we'd lost it," Walter gasped between breaths. "I thought Philip would have found a way to take it. But it's still here. It's still ours." Travis put a hand on Walter's shoulder, saying nothing. Sometimes silence was the only appropriate response to another person's pain. After a while, Walter composed himself. He straightened his shoulders and wiped his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "That was unseemly." Travis shook his head. "Nothing unseemly about being grateful to be home." They spent the rest of the day helping Walter and Dorothy settle in. Travis found a grocery store and bought basics: bread, milk, eggs, coffee. Zoe helped Dorothy uncover furniture and open windows to air out the rooms. By evening, the house looked lived in again. Warm. Safe. As the sun set, Travis knew it was time to leave. He had already been gone too long. His dispatcher had called twice, leaving increasingly terse voicemails. He needed to get back on the road, back to reality. Walter walked him to the truck, moving slowly in the gathering dusk. "I don't know how to thank you," the old man said. "You gave us more than a ride, Travis. You gave us dignity, hope, a reminder that kindness still exists in the world." Travis felt uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what anyone would do." But Walter shook his head firmly. "No, most people would have walked past us. Most people would have found reasons why helping was inconvenient or risky. You didn't. That matters." They shook hands, and Travis climbed into the cab. Zoe was already buckled in, waving at Dorothy through the window. As Travis started the engine, he felt a tug in his chest. A reluctance to leave these two people who had somehow become important to him in just a few days. But life moved forward. He had a job to get back to, bills to pay, a daughter to raise. He pulled away from the curb, watching Walter and Dorothy grow smaller in the rearview mirror. They stood together on their front porch, arms around each other, waving until the truck turned the corner and they disappeared from view. "Will we see them again?" Zoe asked quietly. Travis wanted to say yes, wanted to promise that they would visit, that this was the beginning of something lasting. But life had taught him to be careful with promises. "I hope so, sweetheart," he said instead. "I really hope so." The drive back was long and lonely. Travis pushed through the night, trying to make up lost time. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from his dispatcher. When he finally pulled into the company lot 36 hours later, exhausted and reeking of coffee and road grime, his boss was waiting. "My office," the man said curtly. "Now." Travis followed him into the small, cluttered space. His boss, a heavy-set man named Randy with a permanent scowl, gestured to a chair. Travis sat. "You want to explain to me what the hell happened?" Randy demanded. Travis took a deep breath and told the truth. All of it. The couple at the rest stop. The decision to help. The detour to Riverside. He didn't embellish or make excuses. He just laid out the facts and waited. Randy stared at him for a long moment. "You're telling me you risked your job, your income, your ability to support your kid for two complete strangers?" Travis nodded. "Yeah, that's what I'm telling you." Randy leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "You know what the problem with the world is, Holloway? Guys like you. Guys who think they can save everyone. Guys who put feelings ahead of business." Travis felt his stomach sink. This was it. He was getting fired. He would have to figure out how to explain to Zoe why they were moving again, why he couldn't keep a job, why doing the right thing sometimes came with consequences that hurt. But then Randy did something unexpected. He smiled. "The problem is, we don't have enough of you. Most drivers would have kept going, would have pretended they didn't see anything. You didn't. That tells me something about your character." He pulled out a file and tossed it across the desk. "Corporate saw the news coverage. Yeah, someone filmed you helping that couple. Posted it online. It went viral. Truck driver rescues abandoned elderly couple. Made us look good. Really good. So against my better judgment, I'm not firing you. In fact, I'm promoting you." Travis blinked, certain he had misheard. "Promoting me?" Randy nodded. "We need a new dispatcher. Someone who can coordinate routes, manage drivers, make good decisions under pressure. Job pays better, and you'd be home every night. Your kid would like that, I bet." Travis sat frozen, trying to process this sudden reversal. A promotion, more money, more time with Zoe, all because he had stopped to help two strangers. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. Randy waved a hand. "Say yes before I change my mind." Travis said yes. Of course he said yes. He walked out of that office feeling like he was floating, like the ground beneath his feet wasn't quite solid. He called Zoe from the parking lot, told her the news. She screamed with joy, and he had to hold the phone away from his ear. "Does this mean you won't be gone so much?" she asked. Travis smiled. "Yeah, sweetheart. I'll be home every night." That night, after Zoe was asleep, Travis sat on his apartment balcony and thought about the past week, about the choice he had made at that rest stop, about how easily he could have walked past, how simple it would have been to mind his own business and keep his life on its safe, predictable track. He thought about Walter and Dorothy, alone in their small house, trying to rebuild a life from the pieces that remained, and he wondered if they were okay, if they needed anything, if they were safe. He was still thinking about them 2 weeks later when the news broke. Travis was at work, settling into his new role as dispatcher, when one of the drivers burst into the office with his phone out. "Hey, you see this? That old couple you helped. They're all over the news." Travis grabbed the phone. The headline made his blood run cold. "CEO Philip Ashford abandons parents. Scandal rocks business community." The article detailed everything: how Walter and Dorothy Ashford, former owners of Ashford Hospitality, had been left at a rest stop by their son. How Philip had done it to teach them a lesson about their refusal to sell property. How a truck driver had rescued them and driven them home. Someone had recognized Walter at a hospital. He had gone in for a routine checkup, and the story had exploded from there. Reporters had tracked down Philip. His company was in freefall. Stock prices plummeting. Board members demanding his resignation. Travis read the whole thing twice, his hands shaking. This was his fault. He had helped them, yes, but in doing so, he had inadvertently exposed their family drama to the world. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" his boss called after him. Travis didn't answer. He drove straight to Riverside, pushing the speed limit the entire way. 3 hours later, he pulled up to the small house with the blue shutters. Before he could even get out of his truck, the front door opened. Walter stood there, looking older and more tired than Travis remembered. But when he saw Travis, his face broke into a smile. "I wondered when you'd show up," Walter said. Travis climbed out, his words tumbling over each other. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know this would happen. I didn't mean to cause problems for you and your family." But Walter held up a hand, stopping him. "You have nothing to apologize for, Travis. Come inside." The house was warmer now, more lived in. Dorothy had been cooking. Travis could smell something savory in the air. She emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, and smiled when she saw him. "Travis, how wonderful. Will you stay for dinner?" Travis wanted to refuse, wanted to say he just came to check on them. But the truth was, he had missed them, missed their quiet dignity and gentle humor, missed the way they made him feel like he was part of something larger than himself. "If it's not too much trouble," he said. Dorothy laughed. "After what you did for us, you could show up every day for the rest of your life, and it wouldn't be too much trouble." Over dinner, a simple meal of roasted chicken and vegetables, Walter explained what had happened. A hospital administrator had recognized their names during a routine visit. She had been a business major in college, had written a paper on Ashford Hospitality. When she realized who they were, she had mentioned it to her husband, who happened to be a freelance journalist. The story had grown from there. "I didn't want this," Walter said quietly. "Didn't want to humiliate Philip publicly, but perhaps it was inevitable. What he did was wrong, and the truth has a way of coming out." Travis asked the question that had been burning in his mind since he saw the headlines. "Have you heard from him? From Philip?" Walter and Dorothy exchanged one of their looks. "He came here," Dorothy said softly. "3 days ago. He had a film crew with him. Photographers. He wanted to stage a reconciliation for the media, to salvage his reputation." Travis felt anger flare in his chest. "What did you do?" Walter set down his fork carefully. "I told him to leave. Told him that if he wanted a relationship with us, it would be on our terms, private, real, not a performance for cameras." He paused, his voice dropping. "He didn't take it well. He said we had destroyed him, that our stubbornness had cost him everything, just like it cost the business. He said he was done with us." Dorothy's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. "I keep telling myself it's for the best, that we can't have a relationship built on lies and public relations. But it hurts, Travis. It hurts to know your own child hates you." Travis didn't know what to say to that. He had no wisdom about family dysfunction, no advice about reconciliation. All he could offer was presence. So he stayed. He cleared the table and helped wash dishes. He listened while Walter and Dorothy shared more stories about their past, and when it got late, they insisted he stay the night. "The couch pulls out," Dorothy said. "You shouldn't drive all that way in the dark. Stay. Please." Travis called Zoe and explained. She was with a babysitter he trusted, and she told him it was okay. "Tell Walter and Dorothy I miss them," Zoe said. Her words made Travis realize something. This wasn't just about him helping 2 strangers anymore. This was about connection, about finding family in unexpected places. He woke the next morning to the smell of coffee and bacon. Walter was in the kitchen, moving slowly, but with purpose. "Good morning," the old man said. "Hope you like your eggs scrambled." They ate breakfast together, and afterward, Travis helped Walter with some repairs around the house. A loose board on the porch, a leaky faucet in the bathroom. Small things, but they made the house feel more solid, more permanent. Around noon, as Travis was gathering his things to leave, a car pulled up outside. A sleek black sedan, expensive and out of place on this quiet street. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He was in his late 40s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Travis made in a month. His hair was silver at the temples, his jaw tight with tension. Philip Ashford. Travis recognized him from the news photos. Walter saw him through the window and went still. Dorothy came to stand beside her husband, her hand finding his. They watched as Philip walked up the front path, alone this time. No cameras, no crew, just a man approaching the house where his parents lived. He knocked on the door. Walter opened it slowly. For a long moment, father and son just stared at each other. Then Philip spoke, his voice rough. "I'm sorry." 2 words. Simple, inadequate. But they hung in the air like a fragile bridge across an impossible chasm. Walter didn't move, didn't invite him in. "Sorry for what, exactly?" Philip's composure cracked. Travis saw the moment it happened, saw the tears well up in the younger man's eyes. "For everything, for leaving you at that rest stop, for valuing money over you, for becoming someone you couldn't be proud of." Dorothy made a soft sound, something between a sob and a gasp. But she didn't move forward, didn't rush to comfort her son. She stood beside Walter, waiting. "Why now?" Walter asked. "Why come here now, after everything that's happened?" Philip wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. Because I lost everything. The company, my reputation, my friends. And in the process, I realized the only thing I actually cared about losing was you. Both of you. Travis felt like an intruder in this moment. He started to edge toward the door to give them privacy, but Walter's voice stopped him. Stay, Travis. You're part of this story, too. Travis hesitated, then nodded. He stood awkwardly near the couch, witness to something raw and painful and intensely private. Philip noticed him for the first time. You're the truck driver, the one who helped them. Travis nodded. Yeah, that's me. Philip studied him, and Travis saw something complicated in his expression. Gratitude, maybe, or resentment, or both. Thank you, Philip said finally, for doing what I should have done, for being the person I couldn't be. The words hung heavy in the room. Walter finally stepped back from the door, a silent invitation. Philip walked in, moving like a man approaching a gallows. He sat on the edge of the couch, his expensive suit incongruous against the modest furniture. I don't expect you to forgive me, Philip said, looking at his parents. I don't even know if I can forgive myself, but I want to try, to be better, to be the son you deserved. Dorothy sat down beside him slowly. She didn't touch him, but her proximity was its own kind of mercy. Forgiveness takes time, Philip. You hurt us, deeply, and words alone won't heal that. Philip nodded, his throat working. I know, but I'm willing to work for it, however long it takes. Walter remained standing, his arms crossed. Why should we believe you? How do we know this isn't another performance? Philip pulled something from his pocket, a folded piece of paper. He handed it to Walter. I resigned from the company, officially. This is my resignation letter. I'm done with that life. I want to do something different, something that matters. Walter unfolded the paper and read it. Travis saw surprise flicker across the old man's face. You're starting a foundation for elderly people who've been abandoned or abused. Philip nodded. I called it second chances, because that's what I'm asking for, and what I want to give to other people in situations like the one I put you in. Travis felt something shift in the room, not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility, the first tentative step toward healing. Dorothy finally reached out and took her son's hand. This is a good start, Philip, but it's only a start. Philip gripped her hand like a lifeline. I know. They talked for hours. Travis sat quietly, mostly listening. He heard Philip explain how the scandal had forced him to confront himself, to see what he had become. He heard Walter and Dorothy share their pain, their anger, their disappointment. And slowly, painfully, he heard the beginning of reconciliation. It wasn't perfect. There were tears and raised voices and moments of tense silence. But it was real, honest. The kind of conversation that only happened when people stripped away pretense and faced each other naked and vulnerable. As the sun began to set, Travis finally excused himself. I should get home. Zoe's waiting. Walter walked him to the door. Thank you, Travis, for being here today, for being here all along. Travis shook his head. I didn't do anything special, just helped some people who needed it. But Walter's eyes were serious. You did more than that. You reminded me that goodness exists in the world, that strangers can become family, that kindness matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. They shook hands, and Travis climbed into his truck. As he pulled away, he looked back one last time. Through the living room window, he could see Walter, Dorothy and Philip sitting together. Still talking, still working through decades of hurt and misunderstanding, but together. That was what mattered. 6 months passed. Travis settled into his new role as dispatcher, enjoying the regular hours and the ability to be home for Zoe every night. They established routines, homework at the kitchen table, dinner together, stories before bed, the simple rhythms of a normal life. But Travis thought about Walter and Dorothy often. He wondered how they were doing, whether Philip had followed through on his promises, whether their family had found its way back together. He got his answer on a Saturday morning in May. He and Zoe were eating breakfast when the doorbell rang. Travis opened it to find Walter and Dorothy standing on his doorstep, smiling. Behind them, looking awkward but genuine, stood Philip. "We were in the neighborhood," Dorothy said, her eyes twinkling. "We thought we'd stop by." Travis laughed and pulled the door wide. "In the neighborhood? I live 40 miles from Riverside." Walter grinned. "All right, we drove out specifically to see you. Can we come in?" They spent the day together. Walter and Philip had been working on the Second Chances Foundation, and it was thriving. They had already helped 12 families, providing resources and support for elderly people in crisis. Philip talked about the work with a passion Travis had never heard in his voice before. This wasn't about money or status. This was about redemption. About making amends. Dorothy had gone back to teaching, volunteering at a local elementary school. She lit up when she talked about the children, about the joy of watching them learn and grow. "I forgot how much I loved it," she said, "how much purpose it gave me." And Walter, Travis learned, had been working with Philip to rebuild their relationship. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, still moments of tension, but they were trying. That was what mattered. As the sun began to set, they all stood on Travis's small balcony, watching the light fade over the city. Zoe was showing Dorothy a bracelet she had made, their heads bent close together. Walter and Philip stood side by side, not quite touching, but closer than they had been in years. And Travis stood apart, watching all of them, feeling something warm and full in his chest. "You know what the strangest part of all this is?" Philip said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. "I spent my whole life chasing success, building empires, proving I was worth something, and I lost everything trying to hold on to things that didn't matter. But when I finally let go, when I stopped trying to control everything, that's when I found what I'd been looking for all along." Walter put a hand on his son's shoulder, a gesture small, but weighted with meaning. "What were you looking for?" Philip's voice was quiet. "Purpose, connection, family, the things that can't be bought or sold or measured on a balance sheet." Travis felt Zoe's hand slip into his. She looked up at him with those eyes, Rebecca's eyes, that still believed the world was good. "Dad," she whispered. "Are Walter and Dorothy our family now?" Travis looked around at the people gathered on his balcony, an elderly couple he had met at a rest stop, their son, who had abandoned them and then found his way back, his daughter, who had opened her heart without hesitation, this strange, unlikely group of people who had been thrown together by chance and stayed together by choice. "Yeah, sweetheart," Travis said softly. "I think they are." And in that moment, as the last light faded and the city lights began to twinkle below, Travis understood something fundamental. Family wasn't about blood. It wasn't about shared last names or genetic connections. It was about showing up, about choosing to stay when leaving would be easier, about loving people not because you had to, but because you wanted to, because they had become essential to who you were. The people you save don't always stay saved, he thought. But sometimes, just sometimes, they save you right back. And sometimes, a single choice made on a cold night at a forgotten rest stop can change the course of multiple lives. can create connections that transcend circumstance and become something deeper, something that looks a lot like love. As they all headed inside for dinner, Dorothy already planning the menu, Walter offering to help cook, Philip asking Zoe about her school projects. Travis paused in the doorway. He looked back at the darkening sky, at the stars beginning to emerge. And he thought about that night 6 months ago, about the moment he had almost walked past 2 strangers on a bench, about how close he had come to choosing convenience over compassion. He was glad he hadn't walked away, glad he had listened to that small voice inside him that said, "Stop, help, care." Because in helping them, he had helped himself, had shown Zoe what it meant to be human in the fullest sense of the word, had found a family he didn't know he needed. The world was full of people who needed help, people sitting on benches in the cold, waiting for someone to see them, to care, to stop. And Travis had learned that you couldn't save everyone, that you had to make hard choices about where to spend your limited resources of time and energy and money. But you could save someone. You could see one person in one moment and choose to act. And that choice, multiplied across enough people making enough small decisions to be kind, could change the world. One rest stop at a time, one family at a time. One heart at a time. Travis smiled and walked inside, closing the door behind him. Behind him, the night settled over the city. Ahead of him, his found family laughed and talked and began the work of being together, of choosing each other, again and again, in all the small moments that made up a life. And in a small house in Riverside, where an elderly couple had rebuilt their lives from the ashes of loss, a light burned in the window, a beacon for anyone passing by, a reminder that home wasn't a place. It was the people who chose to stay, the people who refused to walk away, even when walking away would be easier. The people who saw you on your worst day and decided you were worth saving. That was family. That was home. That was love. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you found it in the last place you expected to look. At a rest stop in the middle of nowhere, in the eyes of strangers who became friends, in the choice to stop instead of driving past, in the decision to care when caring cost you something. Travis had learned that lesson in a truck cab on a freezing November night, and he would carry it with him for the rest of his life. Because the people you save don't always stay saved, but the person you become by trying, that stays forever.